You may be a landlord struggling to decide between short-term holiday rentals or long-term lets. One promises higher profits, whilst the other offers stability and also peace of mind. Which was right for your property? Well, stick around because we're going to be breaking down the pros and the cons of Airbnb short-term rentals, as well as looking into real-life numbers. Stay tuned. It's no secret that the rental market has shifted dramatically in recent years. You've got higher costs, tax changes, but also the regulation has become so much tighter. So landlords understandably are looking at their property investment so much more carefully to make sure they can make a return. Now, I want to start off with that short-term rental and the advantage it brings. And one of the biggest by far is going to be the uplift in rent. Up to 30% increase in comparison to those long-term rentals. And the best way I can explain this is by way of a story. A buy-to-let investor, Sarah, who recently inherited a 2-bedroom property in London. Now, this property was in serious need of a refurbishment. And it did have a tenant in place who was paying something along the lines of £2,700. Now, Sarah wasn't quite happy with this and decided to ask the tenant to vacate so she can refurbish. Now, after the refurbishment, she invited quite a few agents into the property for evaluation, and they gave her some good stats. So one of them was $3,250 per calendar month, taking her to something around about £39,000, which is great, certainly an uplift from prior to the refurbishment. And after agent fees, she was left with something along the lines of £33,000. However, she did want to explore this even further. How can she maximize on her property investment, and started looking at the short-term rental, Airbnb to be more specific. She discovered she will be earning £270 per night. Now, based on a 90% occupancy rate, which was more than reasonable to achieve, she'll be making £58,000. And this is after fees from management, but also the portals such as Airbnb and Booking.com. Now, this doesn't include with any cleaning or ongoing utility and even council tax bills. So it really boiled down to higher profits, but higher maintenance fees, or having the stability and the peace of mind of that long-term rental. Did it work out in terms of figures? Absolutely. Short-term rental would ultimately give her more money, even if she takes into consideration these utility bills. But is it worth the hassle? Now, there are other advantages as well, other than that increase in rent. You have a regular maintenance, which means that Sarah can visit the property more often between guests. And that is something that some landlords actually prefer. It's because they can be at the property doing regular inspections, but also it's the flexibility. They can use it themselves a couple of nights a month, or perhaps even for family members. The other is some tax advantages, offsetting some expenses such as utilities, but also repairs. And there are, of course, disadvantages. Higher costs like management, linen, cleaning can cut into your profits if you don't know what you're doing. Regulations, we have regulations such as the 90-day rule in London, but also increased insurance. And lastly, and certainly not least, it can lead to unpredictable rental income, especially if you don't have experience in the short-term rental sector. Now, short-term can be seasonal and the market demand can fluctuate. So that's why it's so important that your property is located in a very good spot. It's always about location, location, location. Within cities, I guess that risk is minimized. But when you have locations sort of like in the coast, you are unfortunately in the mercy of the demand of holiday people. But in the city, you do have those business people and you do have that demand throughout the whole year. And if you're finding this video helpful, absolutely smash that like button. It really motivates me in shooting more of these videos. And switching over to the more traditional long-term rentals, the first advantage that I'm going to bring up is stable income. Now, before COVID, especially here in London, it wasn't unusual for tenants to move around every 12 to 18 months, especially with those one-bed units. However, after COVID, we now see that the average stay of a tenant is around about 4 years. And that, of course, is going to provide peace of mind, stability, and a steady cash flow. So once your tenant is in place for a few years, you don't have to worry about void periods, having to advertise a property again, referencing, having risks involved into, are you going to have a problematic tenant? It just gives you the stability that you may want as an investor. And the final advantage of long-term rental is capital growth. Now, we all know when it comes to property investment, where you're going to win the most is having property long-term. If you tell me you're looking for a property and you want to make a turnover or profit within 3 to 5 years, I'll say to you, don't even bother. But if you're looking at 10 to 20 years, we know that capital growth is one of the biggest advantages when it comes to real estate. Short-term rental focuses on immediate gains. And let's dive into the negative side of long-term rentals, leading with stricter regulations, specifically Renters' Rights Bill, which is going to be implemented at any point in 2025. The one that has landlords the most concerned is going to be the abolishment of Section 21, the so-called no-fault eviction. Now, in some way, the Section 21 gives landlords a lot of peace of mind, because if they have problematic tenants, they can just serve that. And although it has its own challenges, a lot of landlords are concerned because they're going to be left without this option. But potentially we're going to have other resources such as Section 8 being adjusted to be able to deal with these type of things. But there is a perceived risk that this could lead to longer periods of problematic tenants not paying their rent. And the fact that there are so much more regulations coming in for the rental sector in 2025 absolutely means you should subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a thing. And then we've got increased wear and tear. Now, naturally, these tenants are treating the property as their home because that's exactly what it is. However, over the course of some years, it does take a toll on wear and tear. In contrast with short-term rental properties, when issues do come up, they are addressed quite swiftly because you have guests coming in and out. In addition to that, these guests don't tend to stay at home too long, whether they're out for business or out exploring the area because they're there for holiday. Now, for the longer term rental properties, this wear and tear can be things like carpet, the walls, furniture, and it really does take a toll and can be quite expensive at the end of your 3-year or 4-year tenancy. And my final disadvantage on long-term rental is fixed rental income. Typically, when you make a tenancy agreement with a tenant, your rental is fixed, at least for the very first 12 months, sometimes for 24 months. You won't be able to benefit then if there's a change within your neighborhood or your region and rents increase substantially. You will have to wait until the end of that tenancy to be able to benefit from that. In contrast to the short-term rental where people can adjust, or the host can adjust the rental every day, every night, or every week. Now, the challenge is even greater as we come to 2025 with the Renters' Rights Bill, because with the first tier tribunal, you can no longer be able to backdate the rental proposal from the landlord if the tenant, of course, disputes this. And when we look at the figures of long-term rentals, they certainly haven't been flat. In fact, if we look at London alone, since COVID, rentals have increased by more than 30%. So certainly there is an increase there. And if we look at HomeLet's report from October, we can see that the average UK rent is £1,300 plus. And when it looks at UK excluding London, we see £1,100 plus. Now there is a monthly change of negative of 0.3%. However, if we look at the annual increase, it's 3% plus, with the biggest annual rent increase in West Midlands and the lowest being Greater London, just below 1%. And if you are a property investor looking for a great short-term property opportunity, here is a bonus tip for you. Top cities in the UK include London, Manchester, and Edinburgh. And there is an emerging trend with cities like Liverpool and Birmingham offering some great opportunities. Now, the choice between long-term rentals or short-term holiday lets really depends on your property goals, your willingness to actually manage the complexities that come with this industry. I would say always speak to a property professional. And if you want me to guide you the right way in terms of having a conversation whether a short-term rental is right for you, make sure you fill in the form on the description on this video.